The first light I saw in that prison wasn't the sun. It was the trembling reflection of a matchstick, a tiny, defiant spark fighting the suffocating, wet darkness. For just a second, that little flame seemed almost human, fragile, brave, and destined to die. I'd long forgotten what real sunlight felt like. The prison was buried deep beneath mountains, carved into the stone like a wound that refused to heal. Days bled into nights without any distinction. The air tasted of rust and decay. When we spoke, our voices came back twisted, as if the very walls were mocking us. I was brought here with dozens of others. I never learned why. The guards, hidden behind black masks with insect-like eyes, never explained. They just watched. At first, we tried to count the days by the food they gave us, if you could even call it that, but soon, the rhythm broke. Sometimes they'd forget us for days. Other times, they'd feed us twice in an hour, their muffled laughter echoing down the halls. It was all part of the game. One night, I was jolted awake by the sound of dripping water. It wasn't coming from the ceiling, but from the walls themselves, as if the whole prison was sweating. The droplets gathered into thin, shimmering streams, pale and silver, like veins pulsing just beneath the stone skin. I reached out and touched one. It was warm. Prison felt alive. A few days later, one of the older prisoners just vanished. His bunk was still warm, but he was gone. Guards said nothing. But that night, I heard footsteps in the corridors, low, deliberate, dragging. Then came the soft, sickening scrape of fingernails against my cell door. We started whispering about the pit. It was a place they supposedly took people who screamed for too long. A place beneath the baths from which no one ever returned. I didn't believe it at first. Not until they came for me. They said it was an onzon, an old hot spring the prison was built around. The chamber was filled with thick steam that blurred everything into a hazy nightmare. The guards ordered me to get in. I obeyed. The water was strangely clear, glowing with a faint light from below. For a moment, I thought I saw my own reflection, but then it blinked. I froze. As the ripples spread across the surface, I saw them. Hundreds of round shapes moving just beneath the water. Eyes, faces, painted red and white. Daruma dolls. Hundreds of them, all staring up with the same wide-eyed, smiling face, the face of the head guard. I scrambled out of the water, gasping for air, and that's when I saw the other prisoners around me. They weren't men anymore. They were pale, eyeless figures, their wet faces turning toward me in perfect, horrifying unison. That's when I ran. At least I thought I did. Oh. The halls twisted into an impossible labyrinth. Every corner, every turn, led me right back to the same door, the same dripping walls, the same single matchlight flickering in the distance. I screamed until my throat was raw, but no one answered. The only sound was my own desperate echo. The next time I opened my eyes, I was back in my cell. I was dry. I was alone. The match was burning again, but this time it wasn't in someone else's hand. It was in mine. My fingers were shaking uncontrollably. And there, on the wall before me, illuminated by the flickering light, were scratches, deep, desperate gouges in the stone, forming words I didn't remember writing. The light must not go out. After that, the flame became my only companion. Every night I'd strike a single match just to prove the darkness hadn't completely swallowed me yet. The other prisoners stopped speaking. Their eyes went dull. Their bodies seemed to shrink, until one morning, I realized they were all gone. Every single one of them. All that was left were their shadows, stained onto the walls like faint traces of smoke. Weeks, or maybe months, drifted by. I became convinced the prison was a living entity. The walls throbbed with a soft, rhythmic pulse, like a massive, sleeping heart. Sometimes I'd hear voices whispering from inside the stone, in a language older than pain. When I pressed my ear against it, I could almost make out my own name. One night I decided to follow the whispers. They led me down a corridor I'd never seen before, to a small, wooden, half-freighted door. A sliver of light was leaking from the gap underneath. My heart hammered against my ribs. I pushed it open. Inside was a single lantern casting a faint, lonely glow. There were no guards, no prisoners, just an empty chair. On it was a folded uniform, my own guard uniform, and beneath it lay a small, tarnished mirror. With a trembling hand, I lifted it, The first time in what felt like a lifetime, I saw my face. But my reflection didn't blink when I did. Its lips moved first, a cold, familiar smile spreading across its face. "You kept the light," it whispered, its voice a dry rasp. "Now you must feed it." As it spoke, the lantern behind me flared violently. I watched in horror as the walls of the room began to melt. No, not melt. Breathe. Faces pushed through the stone surface, mouths opening in silent, eternal screams. I dropped the mirror. It shattered on the floor, but the reflection remained, staring up at me from dozens of broken shards. Dozens of me, fractured and trembling. All of them smiling that same terrible smile. Now I sit here in the dark, the last match burning low between my fingers. I know what comes next. The light must not go out, because I know what's waiting for me in the dark. I know what I'll remember once the last flame dies. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the dark. If you enjoy stories that linger in the shadows of your mind, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Stay safe, and always, always keep a light on.